That's what makes him really special, his notion that he needed to be proactive. And as filmmakers, when you're making films, particularly this film, you know that you want to make sure that people understand the level of commitment that he had. And you see that. Here's a man who could have had a musical career, when he came out with this song that he redid for Motown. But he decided that his purpose on this planet was something else.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. In this episode, the life and legacy of artist and activist Carl Bean is explored in directors Daniel Junge and Sam Pollard's documentary, I Was Born This Way. Screened as part of the DGA's documentary series, the film tells the story of Carl Bean, who survived the oppression of racism and homophobia and found his voice through a mainstream music career. But dissatisfied with his path to stardom, Bean chose a life of activism, founding LGBTQ+ and AIDS relief organizations to help underserved populations. I Was Born This Way is Junge and Pollard's co-directorial debut. Junge's individual directorial credits include the documentary features Chiefs, Game Changers Inside the Video Game Wars, and Being Evil, and episodes of the documentary series Challenger: The Final Flight, and Secret History of Comics. Pollard's individual directorial credits include the documentary features Two Trains Runnin', The League, and Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power, and episodes of the documentary series Bill Russell, Legend, Hostages, and Why We Hate. Following the documentary series screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Junge and Pollard spoke with director Jade Jenise Dixon about filming I Was Born This Way. Listen on for their conversation.
First of all, thank you guys for coming out on a Thursday in the rain to see this amazing film with these veteran filmmakers. Between the two of them, they've got
old.
Between the two of them, they've got Academy Awards, they've got Emmys, they've got Peabody Awards, they've been in festivals, South by Southwest, Toronto, Sundance. They have all the awards that anybody would ever want.
One of the two of us got the NAACP Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll let you guess which one.
Yeah. And another one was Filmmaker Magazine's top 25 people to watch. I'll let you guess who got that one. So the question I think that comes to mind for most filmmakers, and this is for both of you guys, what was the moment that you knew you wanted to tell the story?
Well, the first of all, Jade, thank you for having us. We really appreciate. We're both DGA members and thrilled to be here. So the film originated with me. I was researching a TV series on protest music, and one of the episodes was going to be on sex and gender. And for me, that meant Lady Gaga's Born This Way, which is like the LGBTQ anthem of my generation and the one that I identify with. And in the process of researching that, I found Carl Bean's story, and it's an amazing story. A guy who drops out of Motown, start the first Black queer church and the first people of color serving AIDS organization. That's a great story. And for some reason, I thought he was in the Midwest. Well, anyway, in long story short, the series, like so many that we develop, didn't happen, but that story stuck with me. And I come to find out that he was here in LA, literally, a couple of miles. His church is in West Adams, and it's still there. If anyone wants to join on Sunday services, you're welcome. And I reached out to them, and I was meeting with Carl within days and setting this up. And somehow he trusted a straight white guy from Wyoming to tell his story. But whenever I endeavor to do films outside of my community, I always try to have people from that community. And Sam and I did an earlier HBO film. He was a consulting producer, and I have such great respect for him. And also our lead producer, Wellington Love, is a Black queer producer. So the three of us were really the core team that made this film.
And Daniel had sent me an assembly of the interview he did with Carl. And as I was saying to Jade and to Daniel in the back, when I watched the material, I thought, man, this is a story and this is a gentleman I never heard about, and I grew up listening to Motown. And I never heard this story about and I didn't really know the song. And I didn't really know Lady Gaga's song either. Oh. So it was like a no-brainer for me to say to Daniel, I would love to get involved with this film as a co-director and really tell this man's story, because that's what we do as documentary filmmakers, tell stories about people that people don't know about.
Well, I think even more so, you are so known for telling untold stories of the Black American experience, which I think this is one of those chapters.
I would agree.
Yeah, well, thank you for telling the story, because I think many of us would not have known about Carl Bean if it had not been for this film. Like, he was a dynamic person, and this story needs to be told. So in the first few frames, we see Billy Porter. And you have Billy Porter, you have Maxine Waters, you have Lady Gaga, you have Questlove, you have Dionne Warwick, all of these people. How was that, first getting them attached and also hearing them like give props to this amazing man?
I'll jump in first. One of the things that's always important about making documentaries is you have a certain level of tenacity. And you got to be able to say, I'm going to keep getting and trying to make this film happen. And Daniel has that. And he knew that to shape the story, he wanted to get people who knew the Archbishop, Maxine Waters, Dionne Warwick, he wanted to get people who knew him. And he also wanted to get Lady Gaga. And it wasn't going to be an easy road. And as a documentary filmmaker, as a filmmaker in general, you just got to be tenacious. And that's what it takes. And it took a while to make this film, which when you think about making documentaries, even though it's 6 years, that's not a long time anymore for docs, but you have to be able to be tenacious. And Daniel was.
Yeah, this film took 6 years. And even though we now know that's just what it took to make. I don't know that I would have endeavored to do this if I knew it would be 6 years. But when you make a film for 6 years, some happy accidents happen or things happen. It just so happens that we were reaching out to a lot of these celebrities that had connections to Carl's story. Now, those of us who make historical films, sometimes on lesser known figures, sometimes we want celebrity in there as a way to help prop up the story and help bring an audience to the story. In this case, yes, we are doing that, but all of them organically have a connection to Carl. And in fact, it's just crazy how much of a spark all of them give props to Carl, because he was the spark to all of them. And so it was really humbling to have, stars like Lady Gaga come in and are just so deferential and so humble and said, what do you need from us and from me? And also to have them so honorific regarding Carl. That was a genuine surprise, and really, I think, helps enrich the film.
Yeah, I mean, you could genuinely tell that they revered him. I mean, it was amazing to see these iconic people talk about this person. Was it 6 years of like going around the country and meeting with them in their homes, or?
Well, in some cases, like Questlove, I was pushing for a while, and Summer of Soul had just come out, and I came to a screening a lot like this, and went up and bugged him at the after party and asked him about this song. He knew about the song, and he knew exactly what he says on the screen. He had heard something about Carl Bean, but really didn't know much, and so thankfully he came on. Gaga, we were pushing for years, and literally like 4 years we were trying to get Lady Gaga through the front door. And when Questlove came on, he was at that recording session with Billy, and on the way out, he said, what can I do? And we were like, well, if you have any connection to Lady Gaga. And he said, Stephanie? Yeah, I can call Stephanie. and literally dialed her up on his cell phone, and within 24 hours, she was on the film.
Wow, it's amazing. Billy Porter in that black trench coat and
as
those
one wears
shoes.
in North Hollywood.
That was everything. Loved that.
Totally.
I loved everything about this movie. I mean, it just hit every emotion in my body. Like I cried about, the religious part of it. I think someone said that these people, when talking about AIDS patients, were going to go to their grave or die thinking that no one loved them. That really hit a nerve with me because in the Black community, religious people, have often looked down on the gay community. How did you guys handle that subject? What made you actually dive into that part? Because you're an editor, Sam, also, so you could have gone any direction. You could have cut it differently. What made you dive into that?
I think it was important to understand that Carl Bean's humanity, it just comes through at every frame. And he understood when the AIDS crisis came about that he had to do something. He had to be proactive. And you see that about him. That's what makes him really special, his notion that he needed to be proactive. And as filmmakers, when you're making films, particularly this film, you know that you want to make sure that people understand the level of commitment that he had. And you see that. Here's a man who could have had a musical career, when he came out with this song that he redid for Motown. But he decided that his purpose on this planet was something else. And we wanted to make sure that we got that throughout the film and you understood that, And that's why people were so generous with their time to talk about Carl Bean, because that man's humanity is through everything about his life,
Absolutely. I want to talk about you guys' journey to getting here. You're veterans in the industry. I know, Daniel, you started off with a film called Chiefs that kind of brought you into the directing world. And Sam started with editing with Spike Lee and, everyone else in the industry. So tell us how you got into doing this for however many years. How many years has it been? Should we say?
Years. Well, I can say that I started by doing more verite films that, there was a revolution that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, where suddenly schmucks like me could buy a digital camera for the price of a used car and go out and start shooting films. And so when, you didn't need gatekeepers to say yes. And so I went and shot some of my first films I shot myself. And so I started doing a lot of verite films and then gravitated more towards pop culture, more towards television, which is how I found this film, as I mentioned. And this film, in some ways, is a return to my roots of doing more social justice. There's a verite thread in it. And so hopefully, all of my skills, I really do, my favorite film is always the one I just finished, but I really do feel like this is my favorite film that I've made. And I think that my career has sort of led to it in some ways.
For me, I was a young man who loved watching old movies on television, old Hollywood films. And I was very lucky to get into a film and television workshop in my 20s. And I initially thought I wanted to be a big-time feature film editor. Now, I did become one at some point, right? But I was very fortunate that after that workshop, I met a gentleman named Victor Konevsky, who trained me to believe that as an editor, particularly of documentaries, that I could do anything. And from that perspective, from that point on, what he instilled in me was this level of confidence that I said, okay, I can. So I went from editing documentaries to low-budget feature films to having my first chance to direct on Eyes on the Prize in '86 and then meeting Spike in the 90s. And I always wanted to make movies. I just love making films, be it as an editor, be it as a documentary director, be it as a producer or an executive producer. I love making movies. I love collaborating with filmmakers like Daniel. And I still do. And I've been doing it a long, long time.
Speaking of collaborating, what was it like having a co-director? How did you guys collaborate together? What were the challenging parts of it, and what were the best parts of it?
I'm going to go first.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
For me, collaborating with Daniel was easy. And why was it easy? Because if I think back to the first time I co-directed back in '86, it was terrible because I was terrible. It was all about me and not my co-director. I learned over the years as a filmmaker that what we do is a collaborative process on all levels. And it's also about give and take. It can't all be about Sam Pollard. It's got to be about Daniel Junge. Now, it's not to say we always agreed, because you can't. But I've learned to be able to disagree in a professional way and understand that and articulate why we disagree. It's not to say it's easy. It can be challenging when you co-direct. But if you have a understanding about your ego, to me, I've been able to deal with it better than I ever did when I was 36 years old.
And I've co-directed a lot. I really enjoy co-directing. They're never the same. In no co-direction that I've done is it a 50-50 workload. It's always one person, and that's got to be a tacit agreement with your director. In this particular one, I think Sam will admit I did more of the work.
That's right.
And that was kind of like just understood between us. And when I was when I really needed him for a big interview or for reviews on all the cuts, he was there. But in a way, you don't know this, Sam. This is the first time I said it, but you were in the edit with me every day, because I always know with you, if every frame isn't earning its worth on the screen, you've got to be brutal and cut it. And you, if nothing, your films are never long. You're always brutal with the cut downs. And so I always had you in the back of my mind. And that's why a lot of times he wouldn't see a cut until I had been brutally efficient with it.
Okay. Can you guys give us an example of when you worked well together, and then maybe when something didn't work?
Oh, I can give you a good example. That last sequence that you see when they're doing the set recording session, we were in the same room. We were there together. I did the interviews with Billy. Daniel was shooting the Verite stuff, with the recording session. I was shooting some of it too. It was fun. It was a really good day. It wasn't any ego issues at all. It was really kind of two directors coming together to make this sequence work. And I enjoyed myself that day. I had a really good time. I had brought the camera person I liked. He had his camera person. It was good. It was really good.
Okay, you bring your own camera person. Okay,
that's right.
So I had another. When we had initially, I had the conception of this film as a short, which looking back is insane. And when Sam and I both decided it would be a feature, it allowed for all of this real estate. It really opened up the film to avenues that we had never done before. And so we interviewed Chris Jones. Really, I was just doing it to be respectful to him, because he had the rights to the song. And then he told me his mom's story, and if that wasn't interesting, we brought it in as a rough cut. And there were some producers there were some people in the film and myself who weren't sure whether that should be in a Carl Bean story. It's really not about. It's suddenly about Bunny Jones instead of Carl Bean. And it was Sam who, I think at one point you said that was one of your favorite parts of the film at that point. And I was ready. I was personally ready to side with the producers and cut it. And I'm so glad that we didn't, because many people have come to the film and that is a surprise for them and one of their favorite parts of the film as well. And it wouldn't be in the film now if it weren't for Sam fighting for that.
Okay, that's great collaboration. Speaking of things that I like about the film, the animation was superb. I mean, can you tell us how you did that? And I know, Daniel, you worked with animation before was it a film called Liana or something like that?
Yeah, so we both have, we both have worked with animation. In fact, you used to work, and you worked in children's television as well. So, Sam and I have both faced this dilemma as historical filmmakers. Sometimes there just isn't any footage. And so there's a lot of recreations this year. We've done our share of that. And I think Sam and I, although I think Sam's been more innovative than me, if you ever see MLK, FBI, that film had really interesting, innovative recreation that feel from the era. But we've both done our share of, soft focus on glasses or following people's backs down the hallway, because the actor invariably never looks like the person, quite like the person, and you can never afford the production design. And so both of us are fans of Richard Linklater, and we knew that we wanted to animate. We're both fans of Richard Linklater and have shamelessly ripped off his style from Waking Life and Scanner Darkly. But the process of that was tricky because we had to shoot everything practically. In fact, our production designer, Chloe, is here. Chloe, are you? Yeah, she did all the practical design when we shot all that stuff practically with actors and did the production design. And then, for instance, when young Sam is coming down the stairway or going up the stairway, that's a stairway.
Young Carl.
Excuse me, young. Yeah. Is that a good Freudian slip?
No.
When young Carl is walking down that stairway, that's a stairway that she had to build in a camera house that we were shooting in. But then all of that footage is then reference for rotoscoping, for hand painting over every fourth frame. We're animating on the fours. Every fourth frame has to be hand painted. And then we recreate the backgrounds digitally. And so we can create a more era specific background because that's done in the computers. But all the characters and everything they touch and everything they sit in had to be shot practically. So it's a lengthy process, and hopefully, gives the kind of background to Carl's story and the superhero comic book treatment that he deserves.
Yeah, it was very realistic. I thought it was like real people somehow. Yeah, but you just explained it that it looked so realistic. Speaking of realistic, we have two straight guys doing a film about the queer community. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you guys learned about the queer community during this process?
For me, I'm not sure I learned anything new. I just think that, we're all human beings to me, and to me as a filmmaker, if I'm capable of telling that story, I'm going to tell it. And that's why I felt I didn't have any issues with it. Now some people may challenge that, but I didn't. I didn't feel that at all,
Did someone challenge you about it?
No.
I think because all of our key positions are held by people of color and or LGBTQ identifying, it not only helps with the final product, I think it helps give us cover, to maybe approach some of these issues that would otherwise be tricky as opposed to, for instance, if I was solo directing and hiring only straight white men to make it. And I think what's apropos to your question, I do think that what I learned is that, this is an intersectional film, and that means overlapping of rights, but it also means collision of rights. And so it was interesting to learn about homophobia in the Black community. It was also highly interesting to learn about racism in the queer community. And these weren't all just like kumbaya movements. There's a collision of rights there. And I think and it was interesting for me, those shades of gray, to include those in the film, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't making it with Black and queer filmmakers.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I did a short called Yellow Inside, where there's a trans person who's my lead, and I got that question a lot, like, why do you want to tell this story? And I have, I learned a lot from it as well. But speaking of, the homophobia and the racism, Billy Porter asks, how can Black people who have been so marginalized turn around and oppress another group of people? And then Carl says that his Black friends were turned away from the white gay clubs where he was performing. So what conversations did those moments spark for you as a filmmaker about the intersections of race and queerness?
Well, queerness and the issues of race is always very complicated in this world. And people always take some sort of stand, either I'm for it or I'm against it. I mean, it's like the whole talk about the abortion issue. I'm pro-abortion or anti-abortion. And the challenge we always face as human beings is to be able to look at these things and understand that it's not so simple, these issues. It's not so simple, You gotta, I grew up at a time in America where there was still segregation in most of the United States, right? And there was a part of me that I was initially taught that I should forget that I was a person of color and become a part of the American melting pot, right? Don't think you're black, just think you're American. I learned that ain't true. That's not true. I got to be a black man, a black person. That's who I am, And so I embrace that, but I understand that I'm still an American. I'm as American as anybody else. But, this whole notion of these differences between us, you embrace who you are, but you understand other people. I learned to understand other people. I don't look at other people and say, oh, that person's an Asian person, or that person's a queer person. I don't look at people like that. I understand who they are, but I don't make them any different than who I am. I embrace who I am. I hope they embrace who they are. So we live in such a crazy world now. And to tell you the truth, it was always crazy. It's always been crazy about race, about gender. It's always been crazy. And people always have to have these sort of it's like when I first came out here in the 80s and I told my cousins I became a Muslim, they said, oh my God, how could you? We're Christians. Give me a break. Give me a break. I respect your religion, respect mine. So this is the challenge we all face as human beings. Respect each other. No matter your gender, no matter your race, respect each other. So that's my spiel.
I think that's why when people say, I don't see color, that kind of, we don't like that. I mean, we have, I've said that to friends. I'm like, if you don't see my color, you don't see me.
Absolutely.
You're not seeing all of me. So it's also, I don't see whether someone's gay or whatever. Well, if you don't see that, you don't see them, because all of that embodies who we are and it makes up who we are. So Daniel, I'll ask you the same question.
I guess what's interesting to me is that the path to righteousness, or I won't say equality, but maybe some form of justice, isn't always a straight line, and yet it's easy for us in our mythologies that we create to make it a straight line. And I think exploring those gray areas, even though they're a little uncomfortable, is our duty as documentary filmmakers. I think of MLK FBI, which deals with his infidelities and reminds you that he was, although he did some incredibly saintly things, it doesn't mean he lived as a saint all the time.
That's right.
And hopefully our film endeavors to do that too, in that it certainly puts Carl on a pedestal, but it talks about the gradations of injustice that happen on the road to righteousness.
Gotcha. Okay, Sam, you received an Academy Award nomination for Four Little Girls with Spike Lee and an Emmy Award for editing the film By the People, the election of Barack Obama. So what's the key difference for you from editing and directing, and is there one that you prefer?
I can answer that.
Yeah. I talked to you in the green room, so I know the answer. But.
No. Wait, listen, the difference is when I was editing, and my friend O'Reed, who's out in the audience, she said the thing about you don't have to take notes. When I was editing, I always had to take notes from directors about, I don't like this, I want you to do this, I don't like this, So I used to get really incensed at taking notes. When I became a director, my initial thought was I won't have to take any more notes. But then I got...
You got more notes.
I got more notes. So listen, the big difference for me, quite honestly, is I don't have to set a machine for 10, 12 hours to edit anymore. I can come in and look at somebody else's cut and say, oh, you found it. Or I can say, oh, it's not quite working, So that's the only difference. I mean, in some ways, with documentaries, and anybody who's an editor of documentaries knows this, in some ways, the documentary editor really is the director. You know, I hate to say that out loud, but it is. And sometimes I would go and look at an editor's cut, and I would say, "Oh my God, it's better than what I even thought." I don't know if I like that. You know,
but you are still an editor. You are still an editor.
I'm an editor in my head,
and
you know. So,
and I am too.
You know, I just love making films. To simply say that, be it as an editor or as a director.
Did you pick one? No, both director or editor as your.
Oh, right now, director.
Right now, director. Okay. So Daniel, you were named Filmmakers Top 25 People to Watch
years
in
ago,
2002.
Many years ago. I'm still a filmmaker to watch.
Right.
I'm still up and coming. I haven't come.
So that was really early in your career, and that was a great honor. How has that influenced your career? And when you look back, how do you see your careers grow?
Well, so I mean, that was wonderful to get that when I was like 30 years old. What I do look back at some of those filmmaker top 20, and some of them have disappeared, but some of my colleagues who I really, really respect and admire were also picked out as filmmakers to watch back then. So being in that, you know, of that ilk, that's what I appreciate now, is seeing that some of those filmmakers to watch became, you know, the filmmakers we now watch, which is amazing.
So I want to talk about the song, which is a huge part of this documentary. Questlove says this one song started a revolution, and Lady Gaga calls the song such a gift. Why do you think this one song had the power to become an anthem for so many generations?
I think because it was at a time when people didn't want to talk about being gay. They didn't want to come out. So it's wonderful. And what I like about the film, one of the things I do like is really learning about the arc of the film, that there was even a version before Carl's version. I love that stuff. You go from that gentleman's version to Carl's version to Lady Gaga's reinterpretation of it. To me, that's a wonderful process and evolution. So that's one of the things that comes away from me. And I think that, you know, the fact that it became this anthem was just, it was time. It just felt like it was time in the clubs back then in that period. I think that's what makes it really special.
I mean, the lyrics are, I'm happy, carefree, and gay. Yes, I'm gay. Ain't no fault or fact, I was born this way. I'm happy, I'm carefree, and I'm gay. I was born this way. I mean, there is no question what this song is about. Same question for you, Daniel.
Well, it's emphatically taking the side of an issue that we still argue crazy to this day, whether these are choices or whether they're, you know, biologically imposed on us. And it's just crazy that we're still having that conversation.
Maxine Waters says, it was because of Carl Bean that we were able to change the minds of even those Black ministers who were absolutely opposed to the gay community. I just feel that the Black community has changed because of Carl Bean. Tell us your view of Carl Bean after making this documentary. If you can sum up what you've taken from what you've put on the screen about Carl Bean, how would you say that right now?
A religious and caring human being. And when I watched that material, the archival material of him in the church, you know, it doesn't matter to me who's in that church. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and I used to have sessions. We used to have sermons just like that. We used to have singing just like that, you know, and didn't matter. That's what makes him so special to me.
Carl Bean was clearly a renegade and an iconoclast and somebody who pushed against the system. But but it's crazy. What he professed is not all that. In some ways, it shouldn't be that profound. What Lady Gaga says last is like loving people who are different than us is the way forward. And that is the core of his message, which you would think shouldn't necessarily be that vital. It should be part of our humanity. But the fact that he was such an iconoclast and that message was so profound when it dealt with Black, queer, trans, you know, people who are different than us, that to this day, that's a message that continues to resonate, but also to be pushed against. And that's why I think this film, even in this so-called modern era, is hopefully still resonates, and so hopefully is still vital, and people get to see it and it makes changes.
So you guys have done documentaries for the past several years. What are you guys up to next?
Well, yours is going to be a lot longer list than mine.
I have 2 films that I'm finishing up. One about Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and another one about the history of the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And just mentioned to these folks, that I'm working on a short film that I bankrolled myself, which is crazy, about John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk.
And I typically would have another film brewing by now, but my main thrust is to get this out into the world. And these are dark days for our industry and for our world in a lot of ways. And so instead of looking for that next project, my full energy right now is getting this one out there. I do have another short that I produced that's on the festival circuit. It'll actually be at Vidiot's on Monday evening. If anyone wants to, it's paired with another short there. It's called Sally's Ashes. And I will give that a little love, but most of my time is going into continuing to get I Was Born This Way out there.
That's great. Speaking of that, what's next for this film? Is it going to go into festivals, or what's your plan for it?
What's our plan for it? Well, again, it's dark days, and we would hope that it finds a distributor. And premiere documentaries these days are looking for streaming deals, and we are too. So we're just going to continue on the festival circuit, and hopefully it'll continue to get love. Seems to be loved by people who watch it, and hopefully the powers that be will pay attention. So please tell your friends if you like it.
Please do.
Yes, tell all your friends. Out of all the projects you guys have done,
Especially if your friend's name is Ted Sarandos.
or Netflix, or out of all the projects you've done, what are your top 2 projects and why?
It's hard.
For me, it's like, which of my children do I love the best? For me, it's always the film that I've just finished that feels like it's usually my favorite. But in this, I think this one will be for a long time to come, just because it took so long. I think that, as Lady Gaga says, we couldn't have polished it anymore. We just poured over every frame, as you can see. And so this one will, if this ends up being my last film for any reason, I'm okay with that.
Well, Jade, I got a lot of films on my resume.
Yes, I know.
This is a wonderful film, but I think the one that took me over 20 years to make about Max Roach is one of my favorites. And
Why?
Because it took me so long.
Why, yeah.
Exactly.
And because I love Max.
Exactly.
He's a jazz musician.
And it is a beautiful film.
Yeah, and probably for little girls for me.
I loved Mo Better Blues. I know you're the editor. One of my favorites.
I love it. That's Spike Lee.
Yeah, I love Spike.
For Little Girls and MLK FBI.
You have so many, you probably can't really choose 2. That was probably not a fair question for you. You have any other ones?
No, it's all right.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap up soon, so I'm going to ask both of you this one question. After sitting with this material and hearing from so many people who loved Carl Bean, what is the biggest takeaway you hope audience walk away with after tonight's screening?
It goes back to something that Daniel said earlier. When you do some of these documentaries and you find people who are like celebrities, you put them in for a bite or two because you say, oh, they'll help sell that film. In this particular film, as Daniel said, everyone loved this man. And they speak about him in a very eloquent way. And you don't feel like, oh, they just dropped him in. They just dropped her in. They're organic to the unfolding narrative. And that's important. When you make that work, that's filmmaking. That's real filmmaking as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have any comment as well about where we are as a culture and the moment this thing is meeting. I mean, it's tricky times, of course. And I think that Carl Bean reminds us that if you stay true to yourself and you don't cave to other people's whims and desires and stay true to yourself, that you can make change. That's right. even if it takes a long time. And it's amazing the change that this one man facilitated. So hopefully there's more Carl Beans in our world right now, because we need them.
Amen.
Amen. And on that note, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
This has been an amazing screening. Please tell your friends about it.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And please share, subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America.